You know, you've mentioned that that you didn't feel equipped to share the gospel. So I'm going to ask you a loaded question.
Sure.
The American church, do you think we need to do more emphasis on equipping people to share their faith? Any thoughts there?
Yeah,
She's careful. You see that? I like that.
very thoughtful. I hesitate here because I do think that the American church, I think that we would really benefit from really simple, practical tools for sharing our faith. And at the same time, I think that, let me just, I'm going to answer your, pull a Jesus move and answer your question indirectly.
She's going to tell us a parable.
So this disciple making movements, this vision that I feel like God has called us to pursue in Europe, the goal is to really simplify being a disciple. And so what we'll do is we'll put the scriptures before people. And it's really crazy because you just make little tweaks between people who are believers and people who are not, we call them seekers, people who are not yet believers but who are curious. And so I do the same process I have Muslim friends that I do this with, who they're like, I want to know more, but they want to go on a journey. They're not ready to be like, yeah, I'm all in. But, you know, we put the scriptures before people and we say, what do we learn about God? What do we learn about us, about people, and how do we obey this? Just 3 really simple questions. And again, I don't think every model, there are pros and cons to every model that you're going to pursue, but this is what it means for us to be church together. We just try to gather together and live out what we see in Acts. And so we gather around the scriptures, we are asking these simple questions, we're holding one another accountable to live these things out. You know,
Wow.
How can I obey this? How can I obey this? And then next week, we're going to say, hey, last week you said that you wanted to obey it this way. How did that go? You know, and so we're really holding each other accountable, and we're doing it in these very small groups, but we're also consistently asking, and who are you going to share with this week?
Wow.
And so that we're always holding each other accountable to not just tend to our own hearts, but to tend to those around us and to keep our focus missionally. Because I think a lot of times it's really easy for us to want to go deep down with this is our community, and we're going to care for each other, and we're going to meet each other's needs, and we forget the lost. Or
Right.
sometimes I see a lot of really apostolic movements who are just going hard and like sharing the gospel left and right, and they forget to pastor their own flock. And so it is kind of a tension to live in, to pursue these 2 things together. But I think that simple equipping is always helpful, but I think that we can get really bogged down in really theological teachings. And I love studying theology, I love studying doctrine, but I've learned that it's a Western privilege. You know who doesn't get caught up in like theological debates is like the church in Iran or the underground church in Afghanistan. Like they don't have the luxury of debating whether or not
Come on,
X,
Jesus.
Y, and Z. Like, again, I might step on toes here, but like the church in Iran is like thriving, and at first, like it was mostly being led by women. Like women were like giving their lives to Jesus left and right, and having to lead others because that was who there was. That's what was happening. That's what the Holy Spirit was doing. And there's people in the West looking over there and criticizing and say, well, women aren't supposed to lead in the church. And it's like, you have that luxury of deciding that, you know, but what are you going to do when you're just obeying God one day after the next? And so and again, it's another tension. It is a luxury, and I don't think it's wrong to be passionate about those things and to study those things, because it is something that I really do enjoy. And at the same time, I don't think it's at the core of what it means to be a disciple, and I think a lot of times we overemphasize it. I think, learning how to do everything exactly right is something that we'll get really caught up in, and I don't think that's what God has for us.